Hey, beautiful souls. Welcome back. I'm Brittany. Hey, your manifesting mentor. I'm not a coach, I'm not a guru, but I'm a woman who walks the walk and who shares what works. And today we're going over chapter 12 of Becoming Supernatural. So, here on this journey, we're breaking down this book by Dr. Joe Dispenza, chapter by chapter, with real world reflections and live discussions each week to help you not just learn the work, but to live it. So today, chapter 12 is the pineal gland. And this is a cornerstone chapter because it opens the door to higher perception. What many of us know as the third eye, but it's not really here, it's in the center of your skull. So we'll talk about that. But Dr. Joe doesn't just stop at the mystical, he gives us the science too. And that's what I love about Dr. Joe Dispenza. It's not just all the things that we love that are mystical. It's the science to back it all up. And don't we trust science? Don't we go to our doctors? Don't we get the medication without question because of the science? Yeah. So this chapter begins with the pineal gland, which is the small gland deep in the center of the brain, not on your forehead. But here, Dr. Joe calls this a transducer. It's often referred to as the seat of the soul or something that translates energy into information. So, why is that important? Because once activated, the pineal gland helps us see beyond the veil, beyond the limits of our five senses. So we also dive into melatonin, which he calls the dreaming neurotransmitter. It's not just about sleep, it's about unlocking biochemical states that set the stage for transformation. And melatonin can actually be upgraded through meditation and energetic work. And not only are we setting the stage for transformation, but we're also setting the stage for intuition and healing. So when we upgrade our melatonin through meditation and energetic work, magic happens. But it's not just magic, it's something we can measure. So without further ado, let's get into it. As you know, when we as a consciousness move beyond the world of the five senses in this three-dimensional reality, we can tap into the frequencies that carry specific information beyond the vibration of matter and the speed of light. When this happens, the brain processes extremely high amplitudes of energy. Time and time again, we've measured and observed this phenomenon in our advanced students' brain scans. You've also learned that when there is an increase in energy in the brain, there will always be an increase in consciousness and awareness, and vice versa. In fact, it's very difficult to determine whether it is energy or the level of consciousness that causes these extreme measurements. But I don't think we can separate the two because you cannot have a change in energy without a change in consciousness, or a change in frequency without a change in information. As you connect to deeper levels of the unified field, the brain is activated by a greater energy that carries specific information in the form of thoughts and imagery. The brain then literally tracks and records this profound inner event. And to the person having the experience, whatever is happening in the mind seems more real than any past external event. In that moment, the increased energy in the form of a profoundly powerful emotion captures all the mind's attention. This is the instant the brain and the body receive a biological upgrade. If someone can sit in a chair with their eyes closed during meditation and have a significantly heightened sensory experience without their senses, it begs the question, what is happening in the brain to explain this supernatural effect? To the person having the experience, despite the fact that they're sitting still, it seems more real than any other experience, determined by their senses that they've ever had. This begs more inquiry. How can we have a fully amplified sensory experience without our senses? What are the specified functions of the brain and the body that translate interactions with the quantum field into profound inner experiences? In other words, if we can interface with a more coherent field of information, which then creates such stimulating inner events, there must be a neurological, chemical, and biological explanation for such supernatural occurrences. What are the unique systems, organs, glands, tissues, chemicals, neurotransmitters, and cells involved that could give rise to such intensely profound experiences? Could there be physiological components that are just sitting dormant, waiting to be activated? Four states of consciousness will help provide a framework for the information in this chapter. The first is wakefulness, which of course is when we are aware and conscious. Next is sleep, where we are unconscious and the body is restoring and repairing. Then comes dreaming, which is an altered state of consciousness when the body is catatonic, but our minds are engaged in inner visual imagery and symbolism. And finally, there are transcendental moments of consciousness that are beyond our understanding of reality. These transcendent events seem to change us and the way we look at the world forever. I want to give you my best understanding about the biology, chemistry, and neuroscience of the transcendental experiences. Let's start with the molecule melatonin, which is responsible for all of this. Now we're going into melatonin, the dreaming neurotransmitter. When you wake up in the morning and return to the world of the senses, the moment your eyes perceives light through your iris receptors in the optic nerve and send a signal to a part of your brain called the no, the super chiasmatic nucleus. Sorry about that. It then sends a signal to the pineal gland, which responds by making serotonin, the daytime neurotransmitter. As you will recall, neurotransmitters are chemical messengers that transmit and communicate information between nerve cells. The neurotransmitter serotonin tells your body that it's time to wake up and start your day. As you integrate information between all your senses in order to create meaning between your inner and outer world, serotonin stimulates your brain waves from delta to theta to alpha to beta, causing you to once again realize you're in a physical body in space and time. Thus, when your brain is firing in beta brain waves, you put much of your attention on your outer environment, your body, and time. That's normal. As night falls and it gets dark, a similar inverse process occurs. The, the, the inhibition of light sends a signal along the same route. That, let me start that over. As night falls and it gets dark, a similar but inverse process occurs. The inhibition of light sends a signal along the same route back to the pineal gland, but now the pineal gland transmutes serotonin into melatonin, the nighttime neurotransmitter. This production and release of melatonin slows down your brain waves from beta to alpha, making you sleepy, tired, and less likely to want to think or analyze. As your brain waves slow down to alpha, you become more interested in returning your attention to your inner world rather than your outer world. Eventually, as your body falls asleep and goes into catatonic state, your brain waves move from alpha to theta to delta, thus inducing periods of dreaming as well as deep restorative sleep. By living within the rhythm of our external environment within this diurnal pattern of wakefulness and sleep, based on where we live in the world, our brain becomes automatically entrained to the daily production of these chemicals at very specific times in the morning and evening. This is called the circadian rhythm. Most of us know that when we move out of this natural rhythm, we become out of sorts, such as when we travel to another part of the world where the sun rises and sets several hours ahead of our normal time zone. This is jet lag, and we need some time to recalibrate. When the body gets out of its natural circadian rhythm, it will usually take a few days to readjust to the new environment's rhythm of sunrise and sunset. This is all chemistry produced from our interaction with our external three-dimensional world, from our eyes' reaction to the sun and the frequency of visible light. Very interesting. Melatonin induces rapid eye movement, REM sleep, a phase of the circadian rhythm that causes dreaming. As the thoughts and chatter in our head diminish, giving way to sleep, and eventually the dreaming state, the brain begins to internally see and perceive images, pictures, and symbols. But before we get into why melatonin is so important, take a closer look at the molecular structure of this dreaming neurotransmitter. The process of creating melatonin starts with the essential amino acid L-tryptophan, the raw material responsible for making serotonin and melatonin. To be converted into melatonin, it must pass through a series of chemical changes known as methylation. Methylation is a process of taking a single carbon and 3 hydrogens known as methyl group and applying it to countless critical functions throughout the body, such as thinking, repairing DNA, turning genes on and off, fighting infections, and so on. In this case, it's part of the production of melatonin. In figure 12.1, we see that methylation in action. Because this methyl group is made of very stable chemicals, the basic structure of the 5 and 6-sided rings stayed the same during this series of chemical reactions. However, as different groups of molecules attach to those rings, they change the properties and characteristics of the molecule, beginning with L-tryptophan. The pineal gland transmutes it into 5-hydroxytryptophan, 5-HTP, which then becomes serotonin. Serotonin is more stable molecule than 5-HTP, can sustain itself in the brain, and has more useful function, as we'll soon see. Through another chemical reaction, the pineal gland converts serotonin into N-acetylserotonin, and then an additional reaction turns it into melatonin. And all of this happens in the pineal gland. In a 24-hour cycle, the production of melatonin is highest between the hours of 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. This is important to remember because that's typically when he tells us to meditate because we have more melatonin in our system. And we're going to talk about that. We now know that there's an inverse relationship between our adrenal hormones and melatonin. As adrenal cortisol levels go up, melatonin levels go down. So when you're in fight or flight, melatonin levels are very low, and adrenal and cortisol levels are very high. This is the reason why we can't sleep when we're under stress. In antiquity, this served as a biological safety mechanism. For instance, if you were chased by a predator a few times on the way to the watering hole, and then you spotted more large beasts in your territory, your body, in its innate intelligence, would want to prevent you from becoming prey yourself. In such cases, sleep and restoration becomes less important than surviving. More aptly put, staying alive by remaining awake through the night is more valuable than sleeping and risking death. When the body is trying to rest in this vigilant state, it never gets the restorative sleep it needs because the survival chemicals, like cortisol, have switched on the survival genes. If the perceived stressor is not a saber-toothed tiger, but instead your strained relationship with your ex-spouse, whom you must interact with daily, the chronic stress keeps the survival system activated. This type of chronic stress alters typical levels of melatonin and even serotonin, knocking the body out of homeostasis. So this is why I started reading this book, because we treat our everyday encounters, our relationships with people in our lives, our circumstances, as if we are in actual physical danger, and our body processes it that way. So you see how in this case, it's the X that you got to still see. And so now your body's in a constant state of fight or flight. Adrenal cortisol levels are super high. Melatonin is very low. You're not getting rest like you really need to, restorative rest. Makes sense, guys. But if you lower the levels of cortisol, melatonin levels will increase. In other words, when you break the stress response by overcoming the emotional addiction to those chemicals, your body can go back to long-term building projects instead of constantly dealing with a perceived emergency. Take a look at figure 12.2 to review the relationship between melatonin and cortisol. Melatonin has many other interesting applications. For example, it's been proven to improve carbohydrate metabolism. This is important because when certain people respond to stress, the body takes carbohydrates and stores them as fat. And fat is nothing more than stored energy. This is a result of primitive genes signaling the body to store energy in the case that there's a famine. Melatonin has also been known to help with depression. It's even been proven to increase levels of DHEA, the anti-aging hormone. For more facts about the importance of melatonin, the dreaming neurotransmitter, see figure 12.3. Now, let's deepen your understanding of all the information you've been studying in this book up until this point. And I'm going to stop part 1 there because that's the end of part 1. Things are going to start getting deeper and holographic, But be sure to check out the full playlist in my bio and on my YouTube channel for all previous readings, and make sure you're subscribed to my YouTube channel so you don't miss when the rest of chapter 12 drops. I also go live twice a week to discuss these teachings in real time with the community. So don't be afraid to join us. I'll see you in the next video, which is activating the pineal gland.